One of the worst of the black Hebrew Israelite lies is the idea that Esau, so Jacob's twin brother, Jacob's older twin brother, and the son of Isaac and Rebekah, that Esau was somehow white, and that white people today are descendants of Esau, also known as Edom, and that we are therefore, quote, white Edomite devils. So it's not just a ridiculous misinterpretation of Scripture, but now something that tries to castigate people as now the enemy, because Edom could be the enemy of Israel, or Edom will be judged when the Messiah returns. Therefore, all the white Edomite devils will be judged. So it's not just a myth and a lie, but it's something that is pernicious and ugly. So the first problem with this is the Scripture doesn't say that Esau was white. In point of fact, according to black Hebrew Israelites, his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, were both black, as well as their parents going back. And his twin brother, Jacob, was black. And then we know later from Genesis 36 that he takes two Canaanite wives who, according to black Hebrew Israelites, they were also black. So that would mean that his mother and father and previous ancestors are all black, that his twin brother is black, that his two wives are black, and yet somehow he's white and his descendants are white. So, of course, that's completely ridiculous, absurd. And we know, of course, that the people in ancient Canaan and ancient Israel were not white. They would have been brown skinned. They could have been darker skinned. They certainly weren't white. So to make Esau white, there's no scriptural support for it whatsoever. And in fact, if you want to argue that he was white because Scripture describes him as Admoni, right, which is red, ruddy, then you'd have to say that King David, whom black Hebrew Israelites also say was black, that he also must have been white because he's described as Admoni. And then even in the Song of Solomon, the similar word used, Adom, similar to Admoni from the same root, from Adom, that Solomon, in the Song of Solomon, was also white, even though Hebrew Israelites say he was black. So the whole thing is beyond ridiculous. So when I asked Al-Azhar about this in our recent debate, this was his response. So you do believe that Edom was white, but we know, of course, that he's referred to as Admoni, which is red, which is exactly how David is described, Admoni. And that's also how Solomon in the Song of Solomon is described as Admoni. So wouldn't that make David and Solomon white as well?
No, sir. So, of course, when we take a look at the color spectrum, we know that red has various different shades, over 50 shades of the color red. So we would have to look at the context of each one of those scriptures to determine which shade of the red that was being referred to. And I believe the red like a hairy garment gives us an idea when we take a look at antiquity. Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the Kermes dye, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, that was taken off the trees of the Mediterranean from the blood of worms and utilized to dye garments. That's blood red. So that's why, because of the context clue that is in that verse, we come to the conclusion that Edom was Caucasian or Esau was a Caucasian versus what we see the description of other people throughout the scripture.
Are you aware that the text does not say that he was red like a garment, but that he was red and hairy like a garment, that the garment is referring to the hair, not to the color? Are you aware that that's how the Hebrew text reads?
I would disagree.
Fair enough. So I said, fair enough. Okay, go ahead. That's not an answer in a debate. I disagree. The fact is we're having a debate because we disagree. But is there any truth to what was just said? No, of course not. First, it's a myth to say that any red-colored garment in antiquity was red with this same particular dye. Yeah, this was this particular dye. To say that all red garments made from hair in antiquity were made from the same dye. Of course, that's utterly and completely preposterous, and there is zero evidence to support it. But let's take a look at what the texts actually say, all right? And you'll see there is no such contextual clue. And whatever description there was of Esau is the same description of David and almost identical description of Solomon. So we look first at Genesis 25:25. It says this, V'yetzeher Rishon Admoni kulo ka'aderet se'ar v'yikre'u shmo Esau. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over. So they named him Esau. So how is he described? Admoni, red. Some say that was the color of his hair, but let's just say color of his skin. That's how he's being described. And by the way, even if you try to argue that he was blood red, as Al-Azhar tries to argue, how does being blood red make you Caucasian? But put that aside. There's nothing, zero, not a syllable, not a letter, nothing that tells you that Esau was white here. Nothing whatsoever. But notice, whatever color he was Admoni. The same applies to David, right? So it says 1 Samuel 16:12. 1 Samuel 16:12. Vishlach v'yehu v'hu Admoni im yefei einayim. So they sent and brought him, David. He was ruddy-cheeked, bright-eyed. Exact same words. So this translation, ruddy-cheeked, otherwise simply red. It's the identical word in Hebrew. However you translate it in 25, translate it here. He was red and bright-eyed or of attractive eyes. The same description in 1 Samuel chapter 17:42. This is Goliath seeing David, right? It says this, Vayabet ha'plishti vayir'eh David vayizvezehu ki haya na'or va'admoni im yefei mar'eh. So he despised him. He's just a youth. He's a na'or. He's just a boy, and he's admoni. He's red. He's ruddy and handsome. And now look at this description of Solomon, the male lover here, in Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 10, Dodi tzach ve'adom dagul mirvava. So interestingly, the King James translates tzach with white, that he's white and ruddy. Here, my beloved, is clear skin. It really means radiant and ruddy, prominent among 10,000. So the same word, Admoni, used for Esau, then for David twice, and then from the same root, Adom, used about Solomon. So whatever color Esau was, that's the color David was, that's the color Solomon was. And in no cases does it say that any of them were white. Absolutely not. So brown-skinned Middle Eastern, they had a reddish hue to them that stood out. That's what it's saying. To make Esau, Edom white is to create something that's not in the Bible whatsoever. As to Al-Azhar differing with the way I read the Hebrew, it wasn't just differing with me. He was differing with basically all translations that understand what it's saying. So here, just look at this little survey on BibleGateway.com. We'll just start running through some of these. ASV, and the first one came forth red, comma, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. So the reference to the hairy garment is the fact that Esau was a hairy man. Genesis 27, Jacob says to his mother Rebekah, he's a hairy man. Well, let's go down to Amplified. The first came out reddish, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau, hairy. That's why they named him Esau. Again, it's a play on words in Hebrew. Let's look at the CSV. The first one came out red-looking, covered with hair, like a fur coat, and they named him Esau. The CJB, the first to come out was reddish and covered all over with hair, like a coat, so they named him Esau, completely formed, that is, having hair already. And on it goes. The ESV, the first came out red, all his body like a like a hairy cloak, so they called his name Esau. Or let's go to the HCSB. The first one came out red-looking, covered with hair, like a fur coat. ISV, the first one came out reddish. His entire body was covered with hair, so they called him Esau. King James Version, and the first came out red, all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And on it goes. The LEB, and the first one came out red. All his body was like a hairy coat, so they called his name Esau. MEV, the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. NASB, now the first came out red, comma, all over like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. NET, the first came out reddish all over, like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. NIV, the first come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment, so they named him Esau. That's what the Hebrew says. It doesn't say that he was red with the hue of a hairy garment that was dyed with a particular dye, and in our now reinterpreting of everything, we're going to make that blood red color into someone who's white. No! It doesn't say that. That is reading something into the text to undergird a pernicious anti-white racist lie. Just like there are whites who have been racist against blacks, and some are still to this day, there have been people who dehumanized black Americans and Africans as of a lesser species because of the color of their skin. That is a demonic, ugly, despicable lie. In the same way, there are those who demonize whites because of the color of their skin. Let's get rid of these racist lies. And above all, let's not misuse the Bible to support our racial hatred. Hey, friends, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, click on one of the boxes on the screen, check out another one of our videos, and be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you don't miss a single video. You know, we discovered that about 60% of you that are watching our videos aren't subscribers. So subscribe today. Doesn't cost you a dime. And if you want to support our work, Line of Fire, and all the things that we do, follow one of the links on the screen below.